Good evening and welcome to the 98th Town Hall hosted by Representative Chrissy Houlahan. My name is Erin Cecil-Smith and I'll be your moderator today. For those of you who have joined us at a town hall before, welcome back. And if this is your first time, we're really happy to have you with us tonight. Before we get into our conversation, let me point out that Chrissy is permitted by law to discuss only official activities during the town hall. There's a legal distinction between official and unofficial activities for Congress people, and so we have to be careful to distinguish between the two. During this call, we cannot discuss political campaigns or political candidates. Another way that we can think about this is that we are able to discuss policies, but not politics. So please keep your questions focused on official business for the duration of the call tonight. Okay, now let me tell you how you can ask questions in this town hall. You can do it in two ways. If you want to submit a question online, you can do that using your phone, your tablet, or your laptop. Just go to houlahan.house.gov/live and submit your question. Again, that is houlahan.house.gov/live and submit your question. The second way to do that is to ask a question live. You can press *3 on your phone right now, and you'll be connected to one of my colleagues in our Westchester, Reading, or Washington, D.C. offices, and they will assist you. Again, just press *3 to be connected. Judging by the size of our audience tonight and our past 97 town halls, it's unlikely that Chrissy will be able to get to every single question tonight. So just a reminder for those of you who've been there and to let those of you who are new know how to do this, if you give us your email address and or your phone number when you submit a question, a member of Chrissy's team will respond to your question over the next few days. And you can always go to our website and send us an email directly from there with additional questions that you may have. You can also subscribe to our newsletter that gives you up-to-date information about what's going on here in our community and down in Washington. If you are not already a subscriber, please press *6, give a member of our team your email address, and we'll get you onto that newsletter mailing list. Again, just press *6. And finally, if you're on social media and you're not following Representative Houlahan yet, please do so. You can find her on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads. And of course, Facebook. So now let me introduce your host and representative, Chrissy Houlahan.
Hi, thanks, Erin. Just making sure that you can hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And thanks very much to everyone who's on the line or online who's joining us tonight. You probably know from Pennsylvania back home that it's primary day. So if you haven't had a chance to vote, there's still time. The polls close at 8 p.m. So if you've already had the chance to vote, thank you. And if you haven't yet, please do so at the end of this call. As Erin mentioned, I've had 97 town halls since joining Congress about 6 years ago, and 97 times I felt pretty confident that I could give you good information or provide context to help you understand what was going on here in Washington, D.C., and how my team and I are working on your behalf, both here and also back home in our district. Unfortunately, tonight, I really don't feel as though I can say the same thing because what's happening right now in our country and in Washington is pretty unprecedented. And I know that's a very, very overused word, but it's one of the best ways that I found to help describe to myself and to you all the upheaval that we're experiencing here in our nation's capital as lawmakers and also as citizens that you're feeling and as taxpayers and parents and neighbors, business owners, et cetera, all of us, just simple, plain humans. When I have the chance to be home, there's definitely a lot of chaos and confusion. When I was elected, I made a promise to lead and to represent all of us with civility and to seek out bipartisan solutions to the challenges that are facing us at home, in our Commonwealth and in our nation. And that commitment definitely hasn't changed. When I can find common ground with my colleagues, common ground that serves you, serves our community, serves our nation, I work really hard to craft and to pass what I call durable and lasting legislation, that legislation that will stand the test of the next administration or the next Congress. And so I'm looking for those places every single day in every single way that I can to help to hopefully work with both parties across a very, very vast and broad political spectrum to deliver what we all, I think, voted for, which is common sense, fiscally sound governing at all levels. When the government is working for us, I believe it works reasonably well. It is not without its flaws, certainly, though it is by its very nature designed to be a slow struggle of give and take and of compromise. And we really can't pass legislation and deliver without those kinds of things. We can balance budgets and address emerging threats to national security only and if only we work together. And we can protect our environment while also encouraging innovation and business development, but only and if only we work together. And all of these things have been true in the past and can continue to be true in the future. However, when a government is not working, either because parties can't or won't govern, or because, like now, we are destroying ourselves from within, it is really, really dangerous for all of us. And that's where I believe that we are, very unfortunately, this evening. I really recognize that many of you at home, some of you at home, or believe in some or maybe most of what President Trump and his administration are doing, and that you believe that it is good. I agree that federal agencies should and can be more efficient. I agree that we need to get our fiscal house in order, and I agree wholeheartedly that waste, fraud, and abuse need to be eliminated. But what's happening right now is absolutely not that. Now, despite how unprecedented these times are, I am very much committed still to always showing up for you and for us. And Erin, as we head into the Ask Me Questions portion of our evening, would you please remind everybody how we ask questions?
Will do, Chrissy. Thanks. You can ask questions in two ways. If you want to submit a question online, you can do that using your phone, your tablet, or your laptop. Just go to houlahan.house.gov/live and submit your question. And if you want to come and ask your question live, just hit *3 on your phone. We'll connect you to a colleague in one of our offices, and they will assist you with that. And Chrissy, I'm going to go ahead and take you right to your first question. It's an online question, and it comes from Barbara in Cochranville. She says, I'm so confused about what is happening in Washington. I'm trying to follow the news about the one big, beautiful bill. I am a senior, and I need both my Social Security and Medicaid. Without them, I will not be able to take care of myself and pay my bills. Will they be cut?
Hi, Barbara. And I think this is kind of goes to what my opening remarks, or I was trying to get at with my opening comments, which is I wish that I could give you solace and comfort that Social Security and Medicaid will not be cut. Unfortunately, I don't know. At this moment and at this hour, in about another 6 hours or so, 7 hours, the Rules Committee here in Congress will be meeting, and I'll emphasize that again today. At 1 a.m. tomorrow, the Rules Committee will be getting together to vote on the rule. And what is a rule? The rule allows us as a full body to vote on the reconciliation bill, which is the very large one big beautiful bill or one big billionaire bill that will be voted on so that we can then vote together as a body on the floor. So if it passes the Rules Committee, if the very large bill passes the Rules Committee, then we will theoretically be voting on this larger bill tomorrow or Friday. But what I can tell you is that even the people who are in the Rules Committee don't know what's in the bill at this point in time, and the people who passed it out of the Budget Committee last night also didn't know what was in it. And if you have a chance to Google some of the conversation that the Budget Committee had when they had their meeting, which started at 10 p.m., you will be very much worried about the fact that the conversation was effectively from the chairman of that committee. I don't really know what's in the bill. They're working on it right now, but we have to vote to pass the bill right now. And it was a really almost comical conversation amongst the committee members if it wasn't so deadly serious. So at 1 a.m., when the Rules Committee gets together, they will be deciding finally on things like whether or not that Medicaid cuts will be included, and my very high expectation is that they will be. I plan on being there tomorrow night, and into I guess it's this tonight at 1 a.m., and I plan on standing beside my colleagues to show the solidarity that I think is needed to be shown, that these programs cannot and should not be cut, because Americans, real Americans, will be facing the brunt of that, and that will hurt many of us. It is estimated that this legislation could take away health care coverage from about 8.6 million people. I've seen estimates from as low as 8 million to as high as 11 million. It will cost cut $715 billion in health care spending, mostly from Medicaid. And so that's the estimates that's coming out of the Congressional Budget Office. And again, it's a moving target. We don't really know where this will all settle. It also would block recent federal rules that are designed to make Medicaid and Children's Health Insurance Program, the CHIP program, simpler and more accessible for eligible individuals like children or older people or people with disabilities. And so this would, in fact, indeed increase the cost of administering Medicaid and CHIP. We think that there are about 13.2% of the residents of our community, of the Pennsylvania 6th, that are under the age of 65 and have Medicaid, and that's quite a lot. We think the total residents in Pennsylvania 6 who rely on Medicaid are about 130,000 people. So I'll say that again because it's really worth noting. Our district, the Pennsylvania 6th, is about 700 and something thousand people, and it's estimated that 130,000 of those 700,000 people rely on Medicaid. So when we're talking about cutting Medicaid, that is a pretty dangerous number to be playing with. The per capita cuts could cut an estimated $1 to $2 billion each year from Pennsylvania's Medicaid budget. And given that 77% of Pennsylvania's Medicaid spending is on seniors and people with disabilities, this would impact the Pennsylvania residents who rely on home care and the Pennsylvania residents who have children with complicated health care or complicated diseases. So we are very much watching this and very much worried. There really is no precedence to what it is that is being considered, and it really is completely not understood at this point in time what will be included and what won't be included in terms of Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid. But the problem is that there is no way to get from here to there without including cuts in these programs, just the math. That's just the math itself. So I'll be watching. I will, without any doubt, likely be voting no. But I really hope that I'll at least even be able to see the bill before we have to vote on it. I appreciate your question, and I worry for you and for our community. And I will turn back over to Erin to see if we have another question.
We do, Christy. This one comes from Diane H., and she is online. Her question is, what is the status of funding for everyday needs that Americans rely on, such as NOAA for weather? She says that she's a boater, and NOAA is a lifeline for she and her family. She asks about FEMA, USAID, and other services that Americans and others rely on in times of need.
So I really appreciate the question, and I appreciate the focus on FEMA and NOAA and to some degree USAID. I think I'll speak really briefly about the fact that I walked out of votes today down the Capitol steps, the iconic Capitol steps. If you remember from when you were a child, Schoolhouse Rock, and where I'm Just a Bill, where Bill sat slumped on the stairs. That's where I was walking down today. And there were dozens of people sitting on the stairs with signs, and they were all people who had been let go from various parts of our government over the course of the last 100 and something days. And each one of them held a different sign, whether they were from, FEMA or NOAA or the Department of Education or Department of Energy or USAID. And they each had their individual personal stories and personal concerns. Those are, of course, individual jobs. And I think there is a kind of a myth that federal employees only come from Washington, D.C. That's absolutely not true. Many of these people are our neighbors, and live in our communities, and our sons and daughters and husbands and wives. And we are feeling the consequences of the layoffs that are happening as a result of DOGE every day as individual jobs. But we're also feeling them in their consequences that will happen either immediately to things like Head Start and to things like SNAP benefits, and we will feel them in the future in things like emergency services for FEMA or weather prediction. They estimate that for every dollar we spend on the National Weather Service, we save about $73. NOAA's budget is about $6.8 billion, and it saves us, estimated, about $5 billion per hurricane. And so, again, to emphasize that, if it saves us $5 billion per hurricane and it costs us $6.8 billion total annually, all it takes is one hurricane to come pretty close to paying for itself. And as you know, hurricanes are not the only natural disaster that hits us. We are, in fact, seeing increasingly more and more natural disasters that are hitting us that places like FEMA can help us with and that NOAA can predict. You mentioned a little bit about boating. We also are hearing from fisheries, not in our community per se, but in the nation as well, and those are, of course, resulting in food on our table and jobs as well. So the northeastern fisheries are starting to feel conditions. They have also lost 27% of their staff as well. So all of this is compounding, I think, already stressed environment and stressed economy. And I think right now what we're seeing is a relatively speaking thoughtless effort to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse, and again, something that I am absolutely an advocate for, but this sort of hapless head cutting of places that we need and do rely on is simply irresponsible. And I think the best analogy that I've heard is that you can't play both the arsonist and the firefighter, and I believe our administration in the form of our president is doing that right now. He's burning things down and then at some point sometimes going back behind and blowing the flames out, but that you don't need to start the fire to be able to make a difference. And I think, unfortunately, that's where we are here in D.C. and back home. I will see if there are further questions, and I thank you for that question.
Thanks, Chrissy. We have a question from Laura H., and she wants to know, does contacting you and other lawmakers, senators with concerns, or sharing her opinions actually make a difference? Is there anything that she can do to make a difference?
Thank you. And this is a really, really good question. We get tens of thousands of phone calls and emails a month here, and we try really hard to process and take care of all of them. And we are fairly unique in Congress for that business practice, that best practice. But the answer is yes. We very much value people's outreach and contacting senators and our offices. But here are some of the sort of rules of the road that I'd recommend for anybody from our community who's listening in, and also for anybody from other congressional districts that are listening in as well. Call the person who represents you. So if your representative is me, call me. If your representative is in a different district, please call them. Please encourage your friends who are concerned to call their district representatives. And also, as the caller has indicated, do remember that you have members of Congress, and that's me in this particular case, but you also have senators, 2 senators per state, and to call each of them as well to let them know what your concerns are. Also do know that there is, of course, federal stuff, and that's what we're talking about right now, all the things that have to do with how our nation manages our federal, the administration and the budget, but there's also state and local representatives too, who you can also call. I would say that one of the things that's most effective to do when you're calling is actually be the one who's calling. And what does that mean? Don't read from a script if you can. Sometimes it's helpful to have a script, but it really helps when we know you're a real person, and it really helps when you're telling us your story. Also, the same with emails. It's better if you compose your own email and write it yourself than if you hit reply to some sort of a mass outreach. Offices know when things are campaign-driven, somebody says everybody do this on one day, and offices know when it's more spontaneous and more organic, and that's more meaningful, frankly, for us to understand that you really took the effort to pick up a pen, pick up a phone, or call. And so those things would be my best advice for you. But we do listen. The other thing I would say is if you're calling or writing, let us know or let the person you're calling know if you'd like a call back or a response. We are a very, very tiny office. We have about 18 people, not even about, we have by law only 18 people. And so with tens of thousands of calls, you can appreciate that we're trying to understand, do you want us to respond, or is this something that you just want people to know that you've called? And how would you like us to respond? That's also very, very helpful. I will see if we have any more calls.
Thanks for that question, Laura. We do. We have more questions. We have a question from Downingtown coming from Kevin M. Kevin says, I work for a solar panel installer, and I personally believe in using renewable energy. For my job and for the planet, I don't like what Trump is doing to roll back energy standards. How can he do this, and what's being done to stop it?
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate this question too. And one of the things that I'm sort of most frustrated about and sort of how I started with our opening remarks reflects that frustration is there is a process that we go through here in Washington to manage the government. And the process is constitutionally driven, and that process has to do with what the role of Congress is, what the role of the executive branch is, what the role of the legislative branch is. And it is the role of Congress to decide what we're spending our money on and how much money we're spending on it. So we have constitutionally the power of the purse, and we have constitutionally legislative authority, and we have constitutionally oversight authority. That is effectively what Article 1 of the Constitution says about this part of the government. I am frustrated because we collectively passed something called the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law last Congress. And I will say and have said consistently, I think the name Inflation Reduction Act is a dumb name and doesn't really reflect what this bill does. But what this bill does do is a number of things. And one of them is some pretty significant, enviable work to try to make our country energy efficient and energy independent, and to do that by making sure that we open the opportunity and the aperture for different kinds of energy sources. That's what the Inflation Reduction Act did, and to some degree the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law did as well. So that was what the will of Congress was, and the will of Congress is the will of the people because you've elected us to make the laws. It is also the will of Congress to put the money against that. We appropriated that money, and the Appropriations Committee is the one who did that. So it is not, in my opinion, nor is it, in my opinion, constitutional, the job of the president to, by executive order, undo all of the things that the Congress has done before they even have had the chance to be done in our communities. And what you're seeing, interestingly, is quite a lot of Republicans in the couple dozens saying right now that they don't want to see the Inflation Reduction Act or parts of the Inflation Reduction Act unraveled or undone, because it actually is helping not only their communities and creating jobs, but also creating this new reliable energy pipeline that we need. So I understand that the president is interested in energy dominance, but in fact his actions are contradicting that by our efforts through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act to rebuild manufacturing, to stimulate the economy for other energy sources. This effort is being undone right now by the president, and as a result is undermining our efforts for energy dominance and energy independence. Critical energy investments are really under threat right now through this reconciliation process. The Republican leadership is now working to roll back a lot of those investments that have been building up in the last couple of years, and you sort of mentioned some of them in terms of solar. We really do need to work collaboratively and bipartisanly. This was also reflected in my opening remarks. We need both sides of the aisle to be thinking about how we can create supply chains that are durable and resilient. And that's why I am really grateful for those Republican folks who have, come in and pushed back on these cuts, because I think that that is necessary. I am the co-chair of something called the Climate Solutions Caucus, and that is a group of 60-plus members of Congress, equally divided between Democrats and Republicans, who are trying to find these pragmatic ways of working together to be able to understand a practical way of bringing energy solutions to our country that also creates jobs. And so I'll keep working on this, and the time will tell, probably the next couple of days, whether those Inflation Reduction Act actions will be further undermined and further cut by the work that's being done here in Washington, but they are definitely being undermined by executive orders at this point in time, too. Erin, I'll turn it back to you to see if there's more questions.
Thanks. We've got lots more questions. I want to jump in for all the new folks who have joined us to tell you how you can ask a question. You can do it two ways. If you want to submit a question online, you can do that through your phone, your tablet, or your laptop. Please go to houlahan.house.gov/live and just type in your question. You can also press *3 on your phone if you want to ask your question live. You'll get connected to one of my colleagues, and they'll take it from there. Chrissy, our next question is from Ian N. Ian says, Trump is legislating by executive action with no oversight from Congress. His question is, do we even need Congress anymore?
Sorry, I was on mute, and I sort of sadly laughed. I worry, too, that we as a Congress increasingly over time, and this is not just over the last 100 days, but rather kind of over the last, several administrations have increasingly been abdicating, our authority and our responsibility as the legislative branch, and I worry about that. I do worry that there is an increasing history, and again, this is on both sides of the aisle. Administrations of both Republican and Democrats have had increasingly more and more executive orders. I think there was an article recently in the Times that said something to that effect and tracked the increasing use and abuse, I believe, of executive orders, again, on both sides of the aisle. We as a body definitely need to take back the legislative pen and the legislative authority of creating laws. Right now we are in a real drought. We vote traditionally now on like 5 or so bills a week. I think we've passed fewer than 10 laws in 100 and something days. We shouldn't measure ourselves on volume, but quality of laws, of course. But even the quality of those laws has been paltry or dangerous. And I think that that's something that I very much worry about. Executive orders are a tool that a president has. They are an authority that he has, or hopefully at some point she has, under Article 2 of the Constitution, which gives power to the executive branch. But it's written as sort of a directive that helps the government or orders the government to take specific actions. But it does not and cannot override laws and statutes. And so they are theoretically supposed to be used to implement the emergency powers. For example, a president might declare a national emergency through an executive order. But they are not supposed to be used to legislate. Congress needs to begin to take their authorities back. This is done by whomever is in leadership. Right now, Republicans are in leadership. They are in the majority. And so, unfortunately, right now, I can't say that our leadership, my leadership, the leadership of the Congress is doing what we should be doing, which is making the laws of the land. And rather, we are following along to what the executive branch would like to do rather than listening to our own communities individually. Turn it back over to Erin.
Great. Thanks, Chrissy. And thank you for that question, Ian. Chrissy, our next question comes from Bill, who's in Wyomissing. And his question is, I've got an HVAC business and my supply chain is taking a hit from the tariffs. Things were hard enough during COVID with getting materials. What's going on?
um, so this is a question that I've heard, or a statement that I've heard a lot from our community. I had a chance to go around our district and speak to a lot of businesses, both big and small. Many of them in the business of manufacturing, and many of them having significant issues and concerns with tariffs and supply chains of one form or another. So you're not alone, and I know that doesn't give you much solace, but one of the things that the markets and individual businesses most appreciate and most need is certainty and stability, and we don't have that right now. I think all of us, or at least my impression from talking to many of our businesses and individual workers, is that we just need to understand what the rules of the road are, and they're changing very, very frequently. It's incredibly challenging, especially as a small business owner, to have those rules changing very rapidly, and it becomes very much of a domino effect. I know a lot of people are trying to figure out how to work through this. Should you raise price in anticipation of a tariff? Should you hold price and try not to pass it along to the consumer? Ultimately, a tariff is just a pass along of an increase. It's ultimately experienced as inflation to a consumer. Also, if you're in a manufacturing job, and HVAC is certainly in many ways one, if you're missing that one part, you can't fix the whole thing. That's also been very, very hard. Many of our community members are trying to find ways to expand their businesses, and if they are in a production environment of one form or another, and I would put yours in that, and you're missing, one part, you can't complete that particular job. So I hope that we have some clarity in terms of what the landscape will look like for tariffs. As I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of them in most cases, because I do believe that they are just increasing costs to the end consumer in most cases. You probably saw today that Walmart is anticipating some prices increasing and some that they're holding steady on. I believe, frankly, and here gets back to the question of the last person, that it's not the president's job, whoever the president is, to have tariff policy enacted or to do tariff by executive order. It is absolutely the Congress's job to do that, and historically that's how we've worked. But instead of Congress doing that, we have, as we've been talking about earlier, abdicated that responsibility and allowed the president to do this by executive order, and I think that is part of the largest problem that we have. So I feel and empathize, and what I would ask of you all who are out there listening is, one thing that is very helpful for us as an office is to be able to share those stories. When I had the chance to visit our community, many of our businessmen and women were reticent to share the stories or to share publicly the names of their companies or the products that they made. And that's really hard for us to come back to DC and articulate, why it is that this stuff is crushing us, when people are unfortunately literally afraid of our government to tell their stories and tell the truth. We have an opportunity on our website to be able to share those stories, both on this issue of tariffs, but also on the issue of Medicaid, which we talked about earlier. And I would encourage you to please do that so that I can continue to be able to share your stories here.
Thanks, Chrissy. I'll just add, folks, if you go to the website and click the red bar that goes all the way across the website that asks you to share your stories, that information comes directly to us, and we can reach right back out to you so that we can make sure people understand the impacts that are happening in our district. So please visit our website for that. And Chrissy, we have your next question. It comes from Kirsten P. Her question is, how has the reduction in USAID compromised our ability to gain intelligence abroad to protect our country?
Thanks, Kirsten. I'm glad that we have a chance to talk a little bit about USAID and about soft power. I serve here in Congress on the Armed Services Committee and also on the Intelligence Committee. And for 4 of my 6 years, I served on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And so I spend a lot of time in Washington when I'm here thinking about this issue of hard and soft power. And for those who, this is a new term to, soft power is the things like USAID. It's the things like diplomacy. It's the things that we do to work with other nations and other citizens of other nations to help them with the issues that would help them grow. Whether it's direct aid like USAID, where a nation or a group is not able to perhaps provide for themselves things like basic needs, or whether it's helping with communities building businesses or building the infrastructure that they need to be able to grow and scale, so that we can eliminate or lessen the need for people to migrate or move. Those are the soft powers that we have, and soft power dollars spent are considered to be orders of magnitude, multiples coming back in terms of the value that it provides for our safety and our security, and for the security of the people that we are providing that to. Hard power is kind of what it sounds like. It's the military. It's the response that we provide when we need to sort of level the hammer rather than reach out the hand. Importantly, CIA and other parts of the intelligence community do not operate through USAID. But I think when we compromise the abilities of USAID, we definitely compromise our national security. Because we are weakening that relationship that we have between our people and other people. And I'll give you a specific example. I had the chance to travel to Mongolia a few months ago. Mongolia sits between Russia and China. You can imagine that it's a difficult neighborhood to live in. One of the things that they were asking of us was more Peace Corps volunteers, because they very much wanted to learn English. Having English as your first language or your language that you're learning when you choose a language is really, really important, to be able to have the folks who are in Mongolia be more likely to align themselves with the United States and other English-speaking countries than they are to align themselves with the Chinese, as an example. They will not likely, or they are very unlikely to align themselves with the Chinese, but they will be likely to align themselves with the Russians. And so that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about the erosion of the soft power. I believe that the Trump administration has, at this point, eliminated about 90% of USAID contracts. They've eliminated billions of dollars of funding. Many of the people who I saw sitting on the steps there today were USAID folks. And these cuts result in the cancellation of numerous development and humanitarian projects that will impact millions of people worldwide. If we want very much to make sure that we are safer and more secure, one way we can do that, and it's really well spent money, is through organizations like USAID. They have been distributed traditionally by experts, and they are I think there is a real concern for me right now that we are ceding that void to countries that are willing to fill it, and those countries will be places like China and will be places like Russia. And what we're seeing is an erosion in our soft power, and that encourages these countries to kind of come in the back door, or frankly come in the front door. And so, yes, your question is very good in the sense that reduction in USAID will compromise our national security, but it is not a direct correlation with our intelligence programs per se.
Thanks, Chrissy. There was actually a part 2 of that, so I will.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss the part 2?
Nope, didn't tell you yet. Kirsten also said, can you speak to the current state of national security? It's terrifying to read about the carelessness on display by people we should be able to trust with our nation's secrets.
I worry very much too, and sitting where I sit in Washington, the state of our national security, I believe, is precarious. We are in the process of eliminating 3- and 4-star generals and flag officers, admirals. That's pretty frightening. We are in the process of eliminating many people who are civilians who serve us in military environments, and those folks are, I can speak from firsthand experience, very, very important to to our security and our national defense in whether they're in practical, everyday ways or in future-looking ways. I served as a project engineer, program manager when I was active duty. Many of the people I served side by side with were civilians, so those are the people who are helping make sure that the warfighter has the systems that they need. And if we're eliminating those positions and those jobs, that's problematic. If we're eliminating the positions and the jobs of making sure that many of our weapon systems are manned, that's problematic and actually very scary. If we're also communicating, as our Secretary of Defense did, on unsecured lines that are not approved by our intelligence agencies, then that's enormously frightening and also speaks to a culture of carelessness that needs to be tended to. So I think we are in a very difficult place, and it's one of the reasons why you may hear from me in our community a lot about national security and intelligence. I recognize that we don't have a military base, as an example, in our community, but every single day I worry about our ability to continue to be safe and secure, and that means that our Defense Department, our intelligence communities, and our Homeland Security agencies need to be working properly. And right now I worry that many of the DOGE cuts are making that less than possible.
Thanks, Chrissy. Hey, I'm going to take you to your last question.
Okay.
I know you've got a hard stop at 7 to move on to your next meeting. This comes from Amanda T. She says the Trump administration is in the midst of an unprecedented attack on the country's science and innovation and higher education sectors, which are central to our nation's economy. What are Democrats in Congress doing to protect them?
Thank you very much for this question, and it is concerning, and a little bit, as we talked about, the cuts to the intelligence community, the cuts to the defense community are similarly alarming in our cuts to science and the NIH as an example. Research in general and specific kinds of research in specific, those are all in peril right now. And of course, one mechanism that I have, and I am a Democrat, is to let people know that that's happening and to make sure that we're educated about that. And what happens there is that we lose all kinds of things. We lose lives. I have personally a friend who's engaged in an NIH trial. We lose future research when those trials drop out or disappear. The people who are participating in them, that research basically gets annulled because the trial has stopped. We lose the people who are conducting that science. They tend to find other opportunities, other jobs, and in some cases, I'll be honest, other opportunities and other jobs are in other countries. And that's, to our detriment and to our peril. So what can we do other than just informing the American public of the danger of this? I can also introduce legislation. There is a bill to ensure that the Department of Education, as an example, is not dismantled. How do we do that? Well, we say, as an example, and this one you'll see kind of replicated across other organizations in the government, is that we don't use any federal funding, any taxpayer money to dismantle the Department of Education. Will that piece of legislation have a time to have a vote on the floor? Likely not, because remember, in this majority, having a Republican majority means that the Speaker of the House is a Republican, and it means that any bill that's introduced, such as this one, will likely not be able to have a vote on it because the Speaker is the one who determines what bills get a vote on. Relatedly, this office introduced a bill that would create a fix for public service loans. So we have a lot of people in our country who are doing the right thing. They're researchers, they're teachers, they're frontline workers, they're doctors, and they are, in some cases, even dentists. We want to keep those people, those scientists, those helpers in the workforce, and one way we can do that is to help with public loan forgiveness. And I hope that this one will have its time, because this is indeed a bipartisan bill, and it has more than 70 co-sponsors on it. And if we have an opportunity to get that through, I think it's the Ed and Labor Department that this one in particular is, and then to the floor for a vote, we can help kind of stop the bleeding, to use an analogy, and have people who are in these fields be able to afford the educations that are helping us. I am one of the founders of the Women in STEM Caucus, and the Math and Stat Bill is an example of a bill that actually did pass the House this Congress that helps us to be able to have better educated people who have backgrounds in statistics and mathematical modeling, which will hopefully help our workforce. And I'll end by saying, well, actually, I won't end because I just have another idea. The biotech field is one that I've spent a lot of time focused on, and is something that, regardless of your party, I believe we should have our eyes on. The Biotech Commission just came out with their 3-year-long report of what we need to do to make sure that biotech doesn't become the AI problem that AI was. You know, we kind of took our eye off the ball on AI. We took our eye off the ball on chip manufacturing, and as a consequence, we're now catching back up, hopefully, to that. Here is a place where we need to keep our eye on the ball, and biotech is something that we can do regardless of what party we are in right now, and we are in the process of starting a group to focus on biotech engineering and manufacturing as well. The last thing, and I know I'm rambling, but this is, you've hit a nerve. This is something of like, what can we do to make sure that we don't lose all of the things that make us exceptional? And the United States is exceptional in the way that we manage science and engineering and higher education. We need to advocate and can advocate for money for our communities. I'll give an example of how, on my end, for this district, we've been fighting. We allocated and appropriated $55 million for Reading, for their Reading High School, to build their STEM high school. $55 million of federal money was allocated to Reading, to Berks County, and was taken away by an executive order by this president. So I can and have been advocating, aka, lobbying and screaming for that money to be given back. The Secretary of Education, Secretary McMahon, took that money away. So I have been working to reach across the aisle, to reach up and down our federal, state, and local government to make sure that that does not happen, that the construction does not literally come to a screeching halt at the Reading High School, because money that was legally appropriated by Congress is not taken back from our community. The last thing I will leave this conversation is, whatever we talk about, we only need 3 or 4 Republican members of Congress to come across the aisle, so to speak, and to agree with these things that we're talking about, so that we can prevent them from happening. And that's not very many. The body of Congress people is 435, and to only need 3 or 4 people to change anything is a very small amount of people. And that's why I would ask of you guys, whoever's on the phone, if you may not be from my district, to make sure that you're aware of who is your congressperson. So if something is important to you, that you're calling them and advocating for that. And with that, I believe that's our last question, and I will turn it back over to Aaron.
Chrissy, that wraps it up. Thanks to everybody who called in or submitted a question. Apologies to those many of you who were not able to get your question answered, but we have them, and you will hear from us in the coming days. Chrissy, I'm going to turn it back over to you to wrap up.
Thanks. And thank you for everybody who joined us, and we will have this available for people who weren't not able to join us to listen in on. And thanks to my team, my mighty team, who helped us with the hundreds of callers that we've had for these town halls. And we, of course, will continue. We are closing in on our 100th town hall. As a reminder, we do about one a month. We do them both in person and by telephone. We move them around the community so that people can come to them if they are in different parts of the community, and we change the topics. Sometimes we do these sort of open-ended ask me anything kind of things, and sometimes we do a focus in on one particular area. I started out tonight saying that when our government is working, it does so reasonably well, but I want to be clear. Getting some things right doesn't count if you're getting most of it really, really scarily wrong. And I believe right now that this current administration is behaving terribly, recklessly, and getting a lot of things really, really wrong. The arsonist and the firefighter analogy is something that I really rely on, because that's how I feel like we are living right now. When we fire people who are managing our nuclear arsenal, and that has been done, that's really wrong. And when we fire people who are responsible for detecting and managing flu, that's very, very scary and really wrong. When we fire people who are in charge of looking up for inbound missiles, that is really scary. When we fire our veterans, and we have been in the process of doing that, and I'm unfortunately worried that many more will come, for working for us in the federal government or working in the VAs. When we fire people who care for our veterans, that's really wrong and also, frankly, I think immoral. So we have to make sure that we call it as we see it. When people are taking federal payment systems and personal data, and we are not certain where it is going to, that's dangerous and wrong, and also, I would argue, illegal. And when we are extorting our allies and we are abandoning our alliances, that is something that, to the question that somebody asked me about hard and soft power, that is very, very worrisome. Ignoring and eroding the Constitution, and this is how I will end, is dangerously wrong. And this is not something that I would just point at our president as doing, but it is also, as we've talked about during this conversation, something that I take responsibility for the Congress doing as well. We cannot just sit by idly and have the Congress not be responsible to the people for our constitutional obligation. I am not standing by and letting that happen. I spend the bulk of every day, all day, and most of the times even way into the night, making sure that I'm trying to do everything I can to protect and defend us from that happening too. Whatever I say, though, and I'll conclude by saying this, my voice is less important than yours at this moment. So I call on you to please call on us, to call on our elected officials on every level to resist all of the things that I believe are really dangerous and lawless, to praise the things that you agree with. Please use your voice, though, for good. Please use your voice to shore up our communities and to make sure that we are helping and providing solace for many people who are very, very concerned and confused and angry. In some cases, that comes out in the wrong way. So I am very grateful to you all for the chance to serve in this way our community. I am hopeful that I'll be able to come home as early as this Friday and see people in our community, but that will remain to be seen from tonight's 1 a.m. call. And I very much appreciate this town hall, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you, and please be well.